Ben Johnson's on a 4-game win streak against Brian Flores. Can this be the time that we snap that streak? How will Flores do it? Let's break it down on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. It is game day, and today the episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, jam-packed show for you, so I got to get right into it. I would like to first update you on some injury stuff that we learned about over the weekend. Don't usually get to do that on Monday morning, but it's a Monday Night Football game, so we get to talk about that. And also, I want to quickly delve into the Brian Flores and Ben Johnson matchup that we've kind of been thinking about on the side all offseason, basically, and how it changes with the Bears. Plus, I want to go over some of the FanDuel lines with the Zoever under, and I have your bold predictions because that's what we always do on the show right before a game. Can't wait for all of it. Let's start with the first thing, though. So, Harrison Smith was given a doubtful designation before the weekend started, but then on Sunday, he was downgraded to out with an illness. He will not be traveling with the team. Christian Darrisaw has been given a questionable designation. He's been really cagey about whether or not he's going to play. He has practiced. He's been practicing for about a month. It still feels optimistic, but basically what they said is they're going to do the week, see how it feels, probably warm up on the game time, see how he feels. And if he says no, or if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't look right, they'll put in Justin School. Kevin O'Connell said that for Harrison Smith, Theo Jackson will take over. The question becomes who takes over for Theo Jackson in 3 safety sets. Will they even run 3 safety sets? I'm not sure. If they do, it'll probably be Jay Ward or maybe Tavier Thomas that takes over there. Or maybe they just run more 3 corners, a little more Jeff Okudah. Pick your guy. Jeff Okudah, Jay Ward, or Tavier Thomas. That's your 5th D-back and maybe a rotation of all 3. We'll see how all that goes down. I'm not going to speculate on what Harrison Smith's illness is. I know we're all curious about it, but that's not something that the team will typically disclose if they don't have to, or if the player is like doesn't want to. So like that's not super uncommon to like not know what the illness is until after the fact. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see on that one. Instead, I want to actually move to the main point I want to make. I wanted to do like a Beating Ben series all offseason because Ben Johnson is on a 4-game win streak against the Minnesota Vikings, and we would like to break that streak. So I wanted to do a whole series this offseason. It didn't end up materializing the way I wanted it to, which I'm disappointed about, but I'm going to kind of do the main thesis was going to be about how Ben Johnson is going to have to do things differently with Caleb Williams, and how the Vikings are going to be able to attack that. Here's what I mean. And actually, Brett Coleman did a great job of explaining why Ben Johnson has had so much success against the Vikings in particular, and why the Rams last year were kind of the only other team that was able to consistently move the ball. You got a little bit from the Packers in mostly really heavily situationally influenced spots, but I do think the Packers have some of the same DNA here that does make them another candidate to potentially move the ball against Brian Flores pretty well. But the key, as Brett put it, was under center play action. And I think it's more just play action in general. That was my theory about it, that it's just more about getting a good run fake, right? And without going super deep into all of the zones and all of the different things that the Vikings do on the back end when they blitz, which is all the time, the Vikings use their linebackers to very precisely place their linebackers somewhere to exactly influence the space the way that their defensive backs need to take away some of the most common blitz answers that you will see. If you were just a total normal random Madden playbook, most basic thing in the world, and you just ran, 5-man fire zone all day long, most teams have seam routes or posts or stuff that's going to beat that all the time. And the Vikings defense is sort of designed to take away those go-to answers. So you have to come up with something new on the fly. And then all the pressure is happening and all the blitzes are crazy and all that, and you collapse. And that works against like a lot of NFL offenses. The thing about it, though, is that it requires your linebackers to be really precise. So if your linebackers have to take a read step because there's a run fake, which is not them falling for the run fake, the second they see run action, they are coached to take a step to read what is going on, a read step. That read step can be either with the run action, it can be straight up, with under center play action. It's often that read step is often supposed to flow with the running back himself. So if the running back is going super wide, you kind of step wide with him. If the running back is going from, an I formation straight up the gut, you kind of run straight up the gut too. So that if it is indeed a run play, you didn't waste time on your read step. You still took a step that helped you get to the position you're supposed to get to, right? So if you take that read step, now it's going to be a lot harder if it is play action to get to that really precise spot that you have to be to help the spacing of the DBs. I'll link Brett's video in the show notes. I think it does a great job of explaining that to a degree I don't have time to get into right now. But it is predicated on under center play action in particular in Brett's eyes, because that makes the linebackers step up. And when the linebackers it's also just a harder fake, right? Like it's just a little bit more drastic. And so it elicits a more drastic response from the linebackers. They have to do it. Whether you're Metellus or Cashman or Pace, you have to. And Jared Goff, experienced veteran that he was able to execute that stuff really well. He was able to line up under center, do the play action fake, turn around, find the guy open over the middle right away, deliver an accurate ball. Caleb Williams is not used to that. This is the key difference. This is, I think, the biggest thing. One of the biggest challenges, depending on how much you believe the Ty Dunn articles that came out over the weekend, one of Ben Johnson's biggest challenges with Caleb Williams is that he's not experienced under center, and Ben Johnson wants to use under center a lot. He does not want to be a shotgun guy. Maybe he's just going to be a shotgun guy, in which case it takes the teeth out of this whole thing. So I don't think he's going to want to do that. I think he's going to want to say, hey, Caleb, we're going to work play action with you, which appears to be the case from camp and from preseason and everything and the reporting. It appears to be the case that they're trying to make Caleb Williams a more under center guy. So what that means is that you don't get to read the defense while you're doing the play action fake. You're sitting in shotgun, you're, carrying the baby with the running back. Your eyes can be on the defense, reading their drops and reading what they're doing while you do that. Under center, you have to turn all the way around and basically run backwards to your spot without reading the defense. You have to turn around and see a picture and then read that picture quickly, kind of catch up informationally. That's why I think, there's two reasons I think older quarterbacks are better at it. One, they're just going to be better at reading things fast. Two, they maybe grew up in an era where under center play action was a lot more common, so they're going to have more experience with doing it, because I think shotgun and stuff is way more common at the lower levels, especially college, but high school as well. You don't see it nearly as much under center as you do in the NFL. So as much as they've worked on the mechanics of that, the footwork and the way you have to turn your shoulders and your hips and stuff and making that precise, that's kind of been one of the main goals of Bears camp for Caleb Williams. It's been getting him more used to under center and specifically the mechanics of under center, shotgun, play action, 7-step drop, roll out, that kind of stuff, which is going to be a great way to make life a little easier on the quarterback in an otherwise really complicated system. The disadvantage of that is that the quarterback got his back turned for the first few moments of the play, which means that you can take your pre-snap look, disguise it, give him a totally different post-snap look, and hope that you muddy the look. This is the main point I want to make about this matchup, that I think if this is the way I would test Caleb Williams if I were Brian Flores. I would disguise every coverage. I would roll safeties. I would present too high, switch to one high. I would present too high and blitz both those safeties at the last minute. I would do anything I possibly could to make it look super different and essentially take away that ability to turn around 3-4 steps into a play at the top of your drop back and see a clear picture of what is going on. I would rotate everything. I would disguise everything. I would have everybody coming from crazy spots all over the field and trying to hit their coverage landmarks from weird angles. Just make it look tough. Add that with the classic blitz, stress the protection calls kind of stuff that that Caleb Williams struggled so much with last year, and hopefully you can induce a bunch of mistakes. That's what I'm hoping that you see, and essentially punish Ben Johnson if he wants to try to make Caleb Williams play too much like Jared Goff, try to, punish that instinct. And if he comes up with something totally different that he drew up from scratch for Caleb Williams instead, well, we don't have any tape on that, so we can't really prepare for it anyways. It's week 1. And hats off to you. We'll figure that out kind of on the fly. That's the way I would do it, I guess. And that's kind of going to be what I'm looking for. Disguised coverages. And on those play action snaps, can we get Caleb Williams to have to read a totally different picture than he saw pre-snap and do it fast because somebody's blitzing off the edge? That's what I want. Will that work? Who's to say? I am not the greatest predictor of these things, which is why every week we are going to be looking at the FanDuel betting odds, not to make picks about it. I'm not going to give you gambling picks, but I am going to try to get a vibe for the game. What does the general public think? That segment is called the Zoever Under, because my rabbits, ZD and Zoe, will also pick the game at the end of it, and we got your bold predictions. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. Daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. We all make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. And right now, the PrizePicks app has a bunch of, all of September, they have a bunch of max discounts. For example, on September 14th, the Chiefs will play, and if you think Travis Kelce will get more than half of a receiving yard, one singular receiving yard or more, you can put that into that discounted square into your play. This is deeply broken. I don't know why PrizePicks keeps doing this. That part's not in the ad copy. I don't even know if they're going to like me saying that, but they really shouldn't keep doing this. It is unbelievably exploitable. You should go check it out if you're into that kind of thing. Download the PrizePicks app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Let me give you an example. If you, for example, they had a Lamar Jackson half a passing yard max discount. If you paired that with Derrick Henry, 1/2 of a touchdown, you would then get 2.5 times your entry. You'd get a payout of 2.5 times your entry just for Derrick Henry getting a touchdown. That's insane. that shouldn't be what those numbers are. Once again, that is called Locked On NFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 plays. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is also brought to you by Upside. You still paying full price for gas? Stop doing that. You're leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. It's free, and start earning cash at the pump. If you use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN, you can get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already were going to buy. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now by using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. If you drive around, if you need to buy gas, you're going to be doing this anyways. You might as well put it on the app and save a little bit of money. Take a little off the top. Imagine how much better you would feel about gas prices if the number on the sign was 25 cents less every time. Once again, that's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Moving along, this is Locked On Vikings, and now this is the part where we're going to go over all of the FanDuel lines for this game, player props, and so on, and see if we can get a beat on how the general public feels about the upcoming game. It's called the Zoever Under, and let's do it! Today, on the Zoever Under, this is a very even game, and the whole time I've looked at the FanDuel odds for the Vikings, including, season-long futures, their win totals and playoff totals and stuff, I've always got the sense that we're sort of just looking at defaults. We're looking at, whatever the most medium number is that everyone can put in that doesn't really say the Vikings are going to be good, doesn't really say the Vikings are going to be bad. It says, we don't really know what's going to happen here, so let's just stick it in the middle and kind of hope we get enough EV off of it being minus 114 instead of plus 100. That's the way I feel about this game. So we'll go over the main lines first. The Vikings have been 1.5 point favorites for basically the entire week. They are now 2.5 point favorites as of this recording. That's actually surprising to me. It was 1.5 when I was prepping this show, like half an hour ago. So it just moved. That's kind of crazy. Maybe it's just that now Sunday night football is over, and a whole bunch of people who just read that big Ty Dunn article are. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, like maybe those people are betting. But it's the Go Long TD is a Substack by a guy named Ty Dunn. He's a journalist that does these like deep dives, long form, really long term researchy stuff. You may remember a piece he wrote about Mike Zimmer kind of around the time when the Rats were fleeing the ship, right before Zimmer got fired and the whole thing fell apart, about him, berating players and players not wanting to play for him and stuff. And it was, I thought, some pretty biased reporting. I think the way that he portrayed the opinions of the anonymous people that, wanted to speak ill of Zimmer versus the way he portrayed the opinions of the sort of loyalists that were willing to go on the record by name and defend Zimmer was a lot different. And I get a similar vibe with this Caleb Williams piece. However, even after like adjusting for that, it's still scathing. It's a really crazy situation in Chicago. If that article is made of even half-truths from disgruntled, fired people, even if that's true, it's still wild unless stuff is just straight up made up, which I doubt. It's behind a paywall, but I recommend that you go to spend $8 for just a month and read that. I think it's totally worth your money. And maybe a bunch of people read that and found this line and went -1.5. Let's short the Bears because clearly they're in a bunch of disarray. I don't know if I necessarily am with that, because the Bear, like, nothing about the Bears has changed in the last day. It's just a bunch of people read journalism. But the general public, for whatever reason, has decided that the Vikings are a little bit more favored than they should be. That's really surprising to me. In terms of the actual players themselves, so obviously the big thing is, will Caleb Williams or J.J. McCarthy play better in this game, right? That's the big deal. The lines are 2 yards apart. J.J. McCarthy's is 220.5. Caleb Williams is 218.5. In terms of touchdowns, both of their lines are set at 1.5. The over is at +116. The under is at -154 for both of them. So their odds by FanDuel are basically identical. This is the part where I start to feel like, okay, nobody knows, so the money must be more or less evenly spread among the two of them for their overs and their unders with this. And so their lines are set really, really, really similar. It's not a situation like you maybe would have seen last year where the Vikings would have Sam Darnold and they would be playing some super established quarterback that would have a line 30 yards higher than Sam Darnold's. And you would get this idea, okay, the public thinks that quarterback is better. People don't know what to make of this one. Find that really interesting. In terms of the rushing props, the Vikings and Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are really eating at each other here. So Aaron Jones's is set at 49.5. Jordan Mason's is set at 40.5. So the betting public really thinks that this is going to be a super even split, which does match the reporting. The reporting has been sparse about it because there's been bigger stories in Minnesota. But whenever somebody like Alec Lewis or Kevin Seifert or Matt Collar is asked, you get this idea like, yeah, no, Jordan Mason's going to play more than you think. And that appears to be reflected here, that it's going to be a more even split between the two of them rather than Aaron Jones and then Jordan Mason taking like 2 drives. Personally, I'm not a journalist. I'll just kind of wait to see what happens there and see if that turns out to be right. I sort of avoided this backfield in all of my fantasy proceedings for that reason. But on the other side of the ball, it's not the same thing at all, right? You have 52.5 from DeAndre Swift, and he's going to be the bell cow. Caleb Williams' rushing total is set at 23.5. JJ McCarthy's is at 17.5. Pretty sensible numbers for both those guys, I think. Those guys aren't going to be making the entire plane out of trying to run the ball. They're not going to Justin Fields it, but they do both like to improvise. I would point out, though, that if these numbers were all turned out to be exactly correct, and they were all like a half a yard off of their lines, the Vikings would be outrushing the Bears pretty substantially. And the same thing is true with the receiving props. Justin Jefferson is at 77.5. Nobody on the Bears is close to that. They got DJ Moore at 57.5, Rome Odunze at 50.5. These numbers are interesting. So with Moore and Odunze, who will almost certainly be the two main leading receivers on the Bears, Colston Loveland is the next Bear set at 28.5. But with those kind of two main guys, if you just take their yards per game last year, DJ Moore's was 56, Rome Odunze's was 48. They're set at 57.5, 50.5 respectively. So essentially, you're just kind of taking their yards per game from last year and running it back. Justin Jefferson's yards per game through his career, 96.5. His line is set at 77.5. So that tells me that there is some expectation that what we have seen from in the past from Justin Jefferson will not come to pass in this game for some reason. Maybe that's belief in Jalen Johnson, even though he's a little hobbled. It sounds like he is going to play or maybe be on a pitch count. We talked to Lauren Cox about that last week on Crossover Thursday. If it's not, it's Nashawn Wright, who you may remember from Vikings camp, being the guy that the Dallas Cowboys kicked over to us when we traded Andrew Booth away and then got cut. He would be the guy that steps in if Jalen Johnson is out. And if he's on a pitch count, that means there might be some snaps of Nashawn Wright, and that'd be something definitely to look out for. But it could also be a little bit of concern about that hamstring injury from camp that was reported on quite a bit. I want to make it clear Justin Jefferson's been cleared from that hamstring injury for like 2 weeks. So if you're tuning into the Vikings for the first time and you saw a bunch of headlines about a hamstring injury, look at the dates on them. It's old news. He's been cleared and fully practicing for a long time now. There is no expectation that he will be slowed down in any way by that hamstring injury. They've been really, really overly cautious with it. It was a very minor strain, and if they were in season, he would not have missed nearly as much time as he missed, but he's not the kind of guy that really needs a camp to get going. So all of that said, with all of this betting line stuff, it's week 1, and there's a lot of uncertainty around these two teams. It's probably not a headline that you haven't already seen, but it would be disingenuous of me to like make one up just to make the betting segment more interesting, because I don't need to do that because I have my rabbits picking the game. So let's move on to that. When I recorded this, the line was at 1.5, so that's what they're going to pick at. For those who don't know, my rabbit Zoe is way better at picking than ZD. Zoe's the tan one and ZD is the gray one. If you are just listening, I'll tell you what happened. Otherwise, if you are watching, please enjoy, as you can kind of see them both come out right as the veg comes down. They're already running. And while ZD went straight for the Chicago plus 1.5 pile, Zoe considered the Vikings minus 1.5 pile and then reached across the plate very deliberately to pick Chicago Bears plus 1.5. So they both pick Chicago in this one. If they are as prescient as they've been in the past, that's not great news for the Vikings. But going with a rabbit to make your predictions is a bold thing to do. But a bolder thing to do is some of the predictions that you guys gave me. Those will be next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets. If you are in the Chicago area and you are trying to get to the Vikings game on a whim, or maybe you're just trying to wait till the last second to save a little bit of money because that's what Gametime does, then get on the Gametime app. Let me pull it up right now and see what kind of ticket prices there are. This is late Sunday night when I'm recording this. Including all fees, because that's how Gametime does this, $435 for seats in Club 3. I assume at Soldier Field that means club seats, with a pretty decent view for $435, including all fees. If you want a little bit less, I see you can get in the door for $291. I see one for $280. If you just want to get in the door and you're all right with the nosebleeds, $248. I think that's going to be the cheapest one there. Top level grandstand 3. That's the night before the game. You can get tickets to get into the door for this hyped up Monday Night Football game for $248. That's all super subject to change. If it doesn't match what you see when you check, that's probably because time has passed. It might even go down, because that's kind of how it works. They go down as the kickoff draws nearer. So if you want to check that out, or go to concerts or other sporting events or whatever, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. It is so time for your bold predictions. Thank you all so much for submitting. Thank you for those of you who submitted season-long bold predictions as well. I have not forgotten you. But let's move on to the weekly bold predictions. Here's how this is going to work. Every week, I'm going to put out a call for bold predictions. It's the same Google Doc as the questions for Town Hall Tuesday and the hot takes. You can just put bold predictions in that one too. So feel free to make multiple entries for a question and a bold prediction or whatever. Go crazy with it. Bookmark that, and I'll put it out on Blue Sky every week, and it'll also be linked in any podcast episode if you lose the link. I am going to try to be a little bit more liberal about the ones that I take. I'm trying not to make these impossible anymore. I do want some of them to hit, and I want the result of what those hits are to be a reward for the person who predicted it. So the way we're going to do this is, if you predict a bold prediction, if it hits, I will make a $20 charity donation in your name to the charity of your choice, like what we do for the Day 3 contest. I'm going to keep veto power over the charity because I don't want you to be able to force me to donate to something I may not necessarily agree with. But beyond that, you have my word. So with that in mind, let's start with one from the Blind Squirrel, who says that Caleb Williams will have more sacks and turnovers than J.J. McCarthy in completions. Now, you have to have a Jared Goff-esque, start the game 20 for 20 kind of thing for this to be realistic. Or you would have to have, of course, several turnovers and sacks and a crazy thing, right? If you could be 20 for 30, and then if Caleb Williams throws 3 interceptions and gets sacked 7 times, it would take that kind of extreme of a game, right, to match a normal 20. But if you're 25 for 30, suddenly this feels a little bit doable. So I see it. I think a lot of the bold predictions that I saw were geared toward the idea that Caleb Williams would be entirely overwhelmed against Brian Flores' defense. And this, again, this sort of drives at the tension of this game, at least from the Vikings' perspective, which is that Caleb Williams struggled a lot against Brian Flores. He was probably the single quarterback that Flores respected the least. If you just go by how often he called his cover 0 look, Williams struggled with that. He got pretty smoked by that in both of the games against the Vikings. The only time that Williams really got the ball to move, and he gets a lot of credit for this because he ended up with over 300 yards on the day, was after the game was well out of hand and he was in kind of 2-minute drill, no huddle. Everything is super spread out and everything is going to be a lot of, chunk yardage underneath, and you're just trying to make the clock go. And the Vikings did fail at that because they let him get it back over overtime, but it did require an onside kick, which, if you remember, their 2-minute strategy last year, and probably this year too, was if you need an onside kick, we're basically just going to make it so that we're basically going to assume you aren't going to get that onside kick, which should be a safe assumption. That was a pretty big blunder. And then just make it so that, the clock is pretty untenable outside of that. But that was where it really went right, when a lot of the Flores tricky dicky stuff couldn't happen. So the next one from Jordan Larson says, B-Flow's pre-snap trickery will cause the Bears to jump offsides 2 or more times per possession. Okay, so 2 or more times per possession would be insane. That would be, I think, impossible by the standards of normal football. But so I looked up what this was. So they had 34 such infractions. I said illegal motions and false starts, just straight up false starts. I feel like those are the ones. Maybe I should add delay of games to that. Okay, there were 6 of those. So they had 40 such pre-snap infractions all year last year, which was pretty high. I didn't add this up for everybody, but they were top 10 at least, or tied for top 5 in all of those, in delay of game, illegal motion, and false start. So that still is less than 3 a whole game. So 2 per possession would be an apocalypse. So let's put it this way. Let's put the line at something that's really bold. If they averaged 2 or 3 a game last year, let's put the line at 3.5. Let's say it will be a really big game. 3.5 infractions. We'll call them false starts, delay of games, or illegal motions, the kinds of things that would result in confusion because of pre-snap trickery. And we'll call that the bold prediction. The next one comes from Adam Thielen's pregame cold brew shot. Says J.J. McCarthy will throw a ball out of bounds and it will be caught by Colston Loveland on the sideline. Michigan to Michigan, baby. Love to see it. The next one comes from Dan Bogosian, who says that Dallas Turner will lead the NFL in sacks after week 1 and week 3. I don't know why you put week 3 in there. Let's keep it to week 1 for now. You can come back week 3 and give me another one if you want. But let's say Dallas Turner leads the NFL in sacks after week 1. So the sack leader right now is Harold Landry in New England. He got 2.5 sacks. Few people got 2. So we'll go with 2.5 sacks. Tied for the lead will count here for me. So we need 2.5 at least Dallas Turner sacks. That's fairly bold. Arif says Luke Braun will break a limb. Thank you, Arif. Love you, buddy. This is particularly likely because I'm going to be moving this whole week, which, by the way, if the sound is like a little bit different, it's because like the stuff on the walls that changed the acoustics of the room has been packed, and it's going to be like that too. I'm going to go to a new setup, and it's probably not going to be all set up right away when I'm like recapping the Falcons game next week. So I will be moving, which does increase the likelihood that I break a limb. So this is less bold than it usually would be. But we'll see. If I break a limb, I guess I'll donate to a charity in your name. That'll feel pretty bad. Sam has the last one. I love this one so much. You all know me. I love this kind of idiot stuff. This is completely ridiculous, and I love you for it, Sam. Says, largest bear ever hunted had a skull size of 27 and 13/16 of an inch. The players on the roster with those numbers, which would be Jordan Mason, Ty Felton, and Will Reichard, will account for all offensive points in a Vikings win. So we'll take defensive touchdowns out of it and say that otherwise the rest of the points are explained by Jordan Mason, Ty Felton, and Will Reichard. That would mean a lot of special teams points. I know you didn't word it that way, but I assume that's what you mean, offensive and special teams points. Because Felton's best chance to score is going to be on a kick return, which can happen. Kick returns have been a thing all week. It's clear that there is like a metagame of trying to figure out what the best strategies for covering kicks and for returning kicks is. And that means there's going to be somebody that comes up with the wrong answer and somebody that comes up with the exact perfect rock, paper, scissors answer that makes a big kick return thing happen. I think this year is going to be a big storming return of the kick return. Maybe that happens in this game in the Vikings' favor. And then, of course, Jordan Mason, gets 1 touchdown. And if it's 1 Jordan Mason touchdown and 3 field goals, this hits too. And we don't even need Ty Felton. All right, that is going to do it for me. I will see you all on the other side. After the Monday night game, I will be live on this YouTube channel. We'll also be simulcast to Locked On Minnesota Sports. And if you can't catch it live, the audio will be uploaded later of the postcast. That's with me, Sam Ekstrom, Ron Johnson, and Luke Inman. And then I will have, of course, a show up in the morning recapping the podcast or recapping the game on Tuesday morning as usual. And we'll proceed from there. I will see you all for that. And as always, Skull.